So, welcome everybody to the Truth Lab. This is our second podcast. I'm Alex. Producer Rob's in the background, and our guest today is the one and only Dr. Narco Longo, the creator of the Old World Florida channel, and it's been instrumental in my truth-seeking journey. So, I'm really excited for today's discussion. How you doing, Dr. Narco?
Doing very good. It's a nice, beautiful day over here in Lake Worth Beach. Haven't eaten anything today, just orange juice. So if I haven't smoked any pot either. So if you ask how I'm doing, I'm a little bit out of my comfort zone, but not really. So just might be a little bit more sober today, maybe. Maybe.
Well, I mean, some of our viewers may not know, but you're very passionate about orange juice, so you walk your talk, right? As long as you have that, you're pretty good. So you're in your bookstore right now, right? Your family's bookstore?
Yes, sir. My brother and I run the Dancing Elephant Bookstore in Palm Beach County, and yeah, that's where I am right now. Usually streaming from in here.
Cool. So did you have a bookstore before this one?
No, my brother and I started going to a bookstore in the West Palm Beach area after or during COVID, during the height, the height of the madness during, the pandemic. And we started going into this metaphysical bookstore. It was one of the few businesses that was actually open during that time. This was like the 2 weeks of terror where it was really like, everyone thought this was like a zombie apocalypse coming. And this store was open. It was called the Rainbow Bridge, and it was ran by a gentleman named Tamaj, who escaped communism as a young, as a young teenager. He was Hungarian, so left Hungary under communism. Has some horror stories to tell about that, and he's a lover of the United States, a lover of freedom and Jesus and Donald Trump, but that didn't matter back then. But he came over here seeking freedom and truth, and he got it. And very quickly, he found a home here and started. He was propositioned by someone else to open a bookstore, to help somebody else open a metaphysical bookstore. Turns out once the deed was done and they were close to opening, the other guy, and I'm a little fuzzy on these details, I wasn't there, but just heard him tell me this, and it's online too, some of the story behind the bookstore. But he when it came time to open the bookstore, the other guy was like, hey, I've got other things to do, this isn't really what I want to do anymore. So he basically handed the keys over to Tamaj. And Tamaj was a young guy back then, and he ran the bookstore for 50 years. And
Wow.
come 2022 or 23, he officially sold the bookstore to my brother and I. And we met him during COVID. He was very, we had a connection to begin with. It's hard going into metaphysical bookstores. It seems like everyone wants a connection with everything, and everyone says they're intuitive and synchronicity, and we run into that a lot. But this was really one of those instances where we never heard of this bookstore. We walk in, and within a year, it was like, hey, this is getting passed down to you guys. So very grateful for that. Tamaj is one of the few. I've had many teachers online stuff. I've had many. Never directly was taught by anyone, but there's so many teachers out there on YouTube. Tamaj is the one of the few people that I can really call a mentor, and firsthand knowledge, firsthand education from him is some of the most valuable stuff I've ever learned. And he shares a lot of similar beliefs to us. The bookstore reflects that. It always has. It's metaphysical bookstore, but it's not a New Age bookstore. Our largest section is Christianity. Our second largest section is um, astrology. And then the next largest sections would probably be Hinduism and uh, Buddhism, even. But we're not a New Age bookstore. So we get some people walking in every once in a while saying it's a witch store. And, we just kindly direct them to the Christianity section and kind of put them in their place. And he was like that too. He was a Christian guy and, wielding the sword of Christianity through all of this metaphysical, occult, esoteric research is really the only way to come out with a sane, with sanity and a good, clean conscience. And there's so much garbage in this esoteric new age space. A lot of souls getting dragged down to degradation, and new age movement kind of facilitates that. But yeah, that's the long-winded answer. This is the bookstore. And
That's amazing, man. Have you always been entrepreneurial?
no, my brother's the entrepreneurial one. I mean, we sold pot in high school, and I was pretty dang good at that. Was the number one. I'll say I was as high as you can go being a pot dealer without being a pot supplier. That's about as high as we were. So we did pretty well in Florida. We got in a little trouble. I should speak for myself, but
Yeah,
I got in a little trouble selling pot. But aside from that, the only for work, I've given guitar lessons. I was a valet uh, runner, like running cars for
mm,
valet on Palm Beach Island for about 2 years in Boca Raton, 3 years in Palm Beach Island, which are, ritzy areas. So that was a pretty nice job to be on. Very cushy exercise, outdoors all day, get to run, get to read. That was an amazing job that me and my brother both did. But during all that time, my brother is doing a lot of investing. This is, probably one of my brother's biggest talents is he's a money guy, and he's very much into investing, and he's entrepreneurial. So he did very well on some crypto markets and the GameStop thing. And don't want to get too
that's
into
awesome.
too private, too much private info, but my brother's very entrepreneurial, and maybe I've got a little bit of that. My dad was pretty pretty good salesman too, you could say.
Well, I appreciate you sharing all of this, man, and just how authentic you are. Because I mean, I had no idea. I didn't know if your parents were helping or what, but knowing, it's you and your brother being this dynamic duo and this energy, and I can't help but think like how this is something that's needed, right? Because I feel in a similar way about the toxicity of the new age, kind of, and
Yep.
necessary confusion, but how it's important to like have that balance, with the metaphysical curiosity, and then like what you said about astrology being the second biggest category of books, in your bookstore.
Mhm.
So you're saying most of the books are Christian based. You sell unique Bibles or
Yeah,
what's
we do.
yeah.
Yeah, we do sell unique Bibles. We've got some. Um, we actually have some King James versions coming in with the Apocrypha in. So a lot of people complain. You got a lot of complainers out there who really don't know much about the Bible or Christianity, who will say things like, well, all the good stuff was taken out. Or they'll say, well, the best books, were censored and all this stuff. And there's very little truth to that. The original King James version had the Apocrypha in it, at least one of them, the original, as far as I have seen. And they were subsequently taken out because they did cause some problems for certain, denominations and certain pastors who couldn't really explain certain things, or ones who wanted to keep up a more negative lifestyle. Certain Bible verses are going to be real tough to explain when you're living not up to those standards. So that's one way to look at it, is that certain things were taken out for the benefit of the church. The way I like to look at it is, here, Alex, what's your favorite movie? No, no trick answer, just favorite movie.
The
Or
Matrix.
just Matrix. Wonderful. Matrix. Now, I'll bet that the Matrix was actually something like 5 hours long, and they had to cut it down to, 2 hours or whatever it's at. They'll usually film like 100 hours of footage, and then they'll only get, 5 or 4 or 3 that they really want. And then, even of the footage that they really, really want, you still have to leave something on the cutting room floor. You've got you've got your publisher, you've got the, cinematography, people calling for certain things. And it's just a matter of reality when it comes to, being a great painter, doing works of art for other people. You're going to have to make make concessions, right? You don't always get to paint what you want always for free. So if someone's paying for something, if someone's helping you get somewhere, it is what it is. The Bible, something had to hit the cutting room floor. My favorite movie of all time still has great scenes taken out that the director would have loved for there to be in there. But you've got to package it into a book. You've got to get it printed out to the people, and that has constraints. So also notice the New Testament is tiny compared to the Old Testament. So if we're talking about additional books in the Old Testament, I mean, it would have just kind of undermined or watered down or outweighed the New Testament at the end of the Bible. So,
Huh. I like that. It's funny, after you asked me my favorite movie, Troy actually came to mind, and then I thought of,
oh, Shelia.
yeah, the whole Iliad and all of that. But what's your favorite movie of all time?
Man, that's a good question. That's some good questions. Uh, Favorite movie, I've got probably three for different reasons. I could never just, say one, but the greatest movie in my mind, like hands down, like, the Led Zeppelin's the greatest band, right? You don't have to agree that they're your favorite, but they are the greatest. The Beatles were the most popular band ever, the most influential band ever, but Led Zeppelin is the greatest. When you're talking about a bassist, a drummer, a guitarist, a singer, and each of them being respectively talented, it's hands down, no contest. Rock and roll, Led Zeppelin's the only way. So what I mean by that is, when I look at a great movie, I'm not demanding my favorite elements, woven into it. I'm just demanding the best to the full, to the best of their capabilities. What did they achieve with a film? And blah blah blah. Maybe that's pretentious, whatever. But Lawrence of Arabia, to me, is hands down the greatest movie ever made. Greatest film, action, adventure. And this was written by one of my favorite books too. My favorite adventure book is Seven Pillars of Wisdom by T.E. Lawrence. And T.E. Lawrence was Lawrence of Arabia. That was his nickname. And he went through the Middle East and basically, some would say single-handedly won World War I for in the Middle East, but other
Hmm.
people look at it differently. And Lawrence of Arabia is a great movie, nice and long. The
I've
things that they,
heard of it, man. So I just wrote it down.
oh man,
I'm
yeah. If you look it up online, you'll see it's widely accepted as the greatest movie of all time. It's like Citizen Kane and Lawrence of Arabia. When you go online, it's like those are neck and neck all the time. And I didn't really care for Citizen Kane or that
hmm.
guy much, but Lawrence of Arabia is great. It's an epic. It unapologetically glorifies white people too, which we need more of that in today's world because it's all shitting on white people today. And it's not a supremacy thing. It's just, hey, let's all give everyone their due, And white people aren't really getting their due. So, that's another reason why Lord of the Rings is so good too. Why does everyone love Lord of the Rings? because it's unapologetically glorifying Northern European people with no hate, no message of superiority, just this is our culture and we're going to present it truthfully, wholeheartedly, unapologetically. And
Those are
that's
all
why that,
good points, man. Well, since we're kind of somewhat on the whole Bible topic, I mean, we got to address the elephant in the room, right? I mean, the Bible is the world's most popular book, right?
right.
So,
Yeah.
have you always been passionate about studying the Bible and being a follower of Jesus, or is there something? Because you know what, the Sunday Bible study started a couple months ago, I think.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yep.
I've been enjoying it. It's tough to, I mean, like last night, man. I mean, what? I think you were going 3 hours, right? I mean, it's impressive, and I think you're getting pretty good feedback, right, from your audience about it.
Yeah, we like to ruffle some feathers too. So that's also a good sign of success. So we're ruffling feathers and we're getting overwhelming, good feedback. So both
Mhm.
are good. Both are good for me. And to your question, have I always liked the Bible? I grew up going to a Christian school, right? A Christian school where
Denomination.
from Episcopal,
Okay.
Episcopal. And I guess I say that I'm Episcopal, but anytime you're clinging to a denomination, you're pretty much disregarding the teachings of Jesus, where he says, "No church, no pastor, no denomination. That's not what makes someone holy or godly or benevolent. Checking boxes doesn't get you anywhere. It's the goodness of your heart." And so I grew up being pretty familiar with the Bible. I mean, my dad read the Bible a good amount after he got like a DUI, and AA is like very Bible based. So he was reading the Bible a lot. I also went to school. Our dad took us to Bible studies on believe it or not, it was Sundays or Thursdays, which is usually when those things happen because it's the 2 days of Christianity. Sunday's the Son of God. And then Thursdays, Thor, King Arthur, Jupiter, Zeus, Jesus. Yeah, that's Jesus Day is Thursday.
Hmm.
And so we grew up a little bit going to Bible study, but in school they hammered the Bible into us. We had a Bible study class in elementary school, or like a group Bible study. Then in middle school we had a Bible class and an ethics class. So in sixth grade, we read the Bible start to finish, at least once.
Old
In
Testament
ethics,
and New,
yeah,
both.
oh yeah, yes sir. And then in seventh grade, we had an ethics class, and then in eighth grade, there's something else along those lines. But so we read the Bible. We read all in ethics class. We read all the world religions,
Mhm.
as much as you can in a curriculum. But Christianity always struck me as the superior religion. And I mean that with no, ill will or anything like that. It's just, I've said on some of my live streams, every world religion exalts Jesus,
Mhm.
but Jesus does not exalt every world religion. So that kind of tells you something. If the Hindus are telling you he is the ascended Kalki avatar, you know, Krishna, Vishnu himself, in the flesh representation of the Godhead, and this, Hinduism agrees, Buddhism largely agrees, even Islam places Jesus at at an equal, if not higher, status than Muhammad. So a lot of these things have to tell us something, that there has to be a message there, a kernel of truth. And moving forward, for a period of time, I think I was calling myself an atheist. My dad was an alcoholic, and he always used to look at us and say, "Life is shit." And that's about as nihilistic as it gets. And you'll see a lot of that with alcoholics, people who drink just anyone who drinks in general. You know, this nihilism always sneaks its way into life and casts doubt on life, casts a shadow on life. And I definitely struggled with nihilism for a little bit at the direct hands of my father, who would, in confidence, in moments of like, you know, telling your kids something that really matters. You know, hey, it's just me and you. Just had a rough day. Let me tell you, you know, what life is like. And he would say things like, "Life is shit," you know. And so I dealt with that for a little bit, where it's kind of seemed just like a black hole. Like life is like a black hole. And I remember watching The Hurt Locker. So here, this is what happened. Sorry, this is a better way to. I remember watching The Hurt Locker, right? This Iraq movie. So, you know, you asked about movies earlier. I went to see The Hurt Locker with my dad. Very bad movie. Very slow. You know, very focused on death and terror, and which are good. Those things can be great. You know, those things can be great. But I remember walking home, and you just seeing all these people blow up like in the movie. Like, and I was maybe 11 or 12. You know, do the math. Whenever Hurt Locker came out, and was walking out of the theater or back into my house, back into the house after coming home from the theater, and I said to my dad, you know, what happens when you die? What happens when we die? Like, we just saw a bunch of people die. It's kind of hitting me for the first time, like mortality. And he said, that's essentially when he said something like to the effect of, life is shit and nothing happens. And that stuck with me for a little bit. And then one time I was at Sunday school. Now this is about eighth grade. I was had a friend's house who we were only allowed to sleep over at if we went to Sunday school with them the next day. So a lot of times we'd go over on Friday night too. And the stipulation would be, you can stay the whole weekend, but we have to go to Sunday school on Sunday. So we'd go over on Friday, stay all Saturday, drink all the soda, eat all the candy. His parents let us do whatever we want. But Sunday morning, we all had to go to Sunday school. So I'd go to this Venezuelan Bible study. They all spoke Spanish, right? I spoke enough Spanish to get by in school. I had like 11 years of Spanish in school. So I know Spanish pretty well. And these two Venezuelan families would always bring us to Bible study. And I noticed that, they were benevolent. They're very cheerful. They didn't deal with alcoholism as much, right? They kind of walked the talk. And one day I got cornered in this Sunday school class. And they said, do you believe in God, or do you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? And I really didn't like that. I was like, well, doesn't seem like Christianity to me. It's like this interrogation technique. But nonetheless, if you can get over being triggered by being held to a high standard, it struck me that these people were all authentic. And even if they weren't going about it the right way, they were genuinely interested in helping me, saving me, making sure that I wasn't an atheist. And so in that moment, I kind of relented and said, yeah, whatever you guys are asking of me. And there's a little bit of a language barrier, but I was like, yeah, Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. And the kind of, I don't look at that as like my conversion moment or anything, but it definitely did lift the nihilistic black cloud off of my life.
You were
And
12 or 13 then?
yeah,
Okay.
I was probably 12. Yeah.
Wow. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, that's it. And that's when I guess started officially calling myself a Christian, just very loosely, very loosely. And going through middle school, high school, was not super passionate about the Bible. Well, I was very passionate about conspiracy theories and getting to the truth. And you go down enough rabbit holes, you go down enough conspiracy theories, you realize there's two things that the Illuminati, New World Order, whatever you want to call them, hates most: holistic health, they hate that. They want it erased. Totally. And what else do they hate and want erased entirely?
God.
God, and specifically the God described by Jesus of Nazareth from Galilee. So Jesus is the number one target of the Illuminati. And, if you look at who he was preaching against, it was the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the money changers and the animal sacrificers. That's still the currency. That's still the medium by which the world is corrupted today. So we're very much still in that battle. Jesus's battle was pertinent to today, and we need Jesus today more than ever. You don't need to say Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. Okay, that's not being a Christian, right? What you do need to accept is that blood sacrifice achieves nothing, but it furthers sin. It delays the punishment of sin. It offsets it. The person who's doing blood sacrifice seeks to transfer their sins into the animal. I mean, if this isn't as satanic as it gets, man. So Jesus stood up against that, and going down all these rabbit holes of conspiracy theories. I saw a UFO when I was like 15. All these things. You really, if you do your due diligence, if you cling to the truth, keep an open mind, you will inevitably come back around to holistic health and Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
It's inevitable. It's the finish line of every rabbit hole there is. So, yeah.
And I love your shirt after what you were saying about your dad saying life is shit. And look at you. Life is good, And even you were sharing with me before about when I shared an opinion about creator compared to God. And I remember what you were sharing, God being good. And, I do want to touch on blood sacrifice, because for a lot of Christians, they look at their sin was washed away by Jesus' blood.
Right.
So there is a little bit of that. And for me personally, I kind of don't really resonate with that, because the idea that Jesus' sacrifice was needed, for humanity to be forgiven of sins. So I guess we could touch on it. And then after, I am curious about your beliefs about Jesus being, born of a virgin, or even maybe the astrology, because sometimes there's different scholars don't agree of his alleged birth date, and then maybe
right.
thoughts on his actual astrology, and then conclude with him, his dead body coming back to life too, that belief as well.
Right. Well, sure.
Thank you.
You initially, what was the first question? Remind me.
You brought up the blood sacrifice and people
Yes.
transferring it to like an animal, and then I'm looking at how a lot of Christians, you go to church, you see a Jesus nailed to a cross, suffering,
Mm-hmm.
and what that psychologically does to people. And then the idea of like, why would God send his only son to be blood sacrificed? Or when people are in church and they're saying the blood of Jesus is washing over me.
Right. Yeah. A lot of that stuff is superstition added on by the churches, but animal sacrifice, let's just address that. So in the Garden of Eden, there was no animal sacrifice. None. Man was originally created as a fruitarian and herbivore, a frugivorous herbivore, or an herbivorous frugivore, right? Somewhere between the two, frugivorous and herbivorous. And you go look at all the dentistry of all the animals in the world, and it's pretty evident just from the teeth alone that we are frugivorous, if not herbivorous. And that's what the Bible says when God gave us fruit and herb bearing seed. Now, sacrifice first comes about in the minds of many when Cain and Abel makes a offering of the first of his flock. It does not say that there was a slaughter. It does not say that there was a charring or a burning, it does not say All it says is the fats of the first of his flock. Fat can be butter, it can be ghee, it can be even the oils on the coating of certain parts of your body. It can be the substances derived from animal glands, right? And also, again, we don't see any instance of slaughter. It just says the fat, the first of his flock. So it might have simply been that they were saying, God saying, or Abel saying to God, I'm offering this to you. And God didn't, need the bloodshed. So it just kind of stops there. And he says, well, I'm grateful for that. And I'll tell you why I think Abel offered the first of his flock. Well, the first fruits offering is worldwide, universal, right? Indigenous people, for as long as we look back in time, the first fruits, the first, buds, the first things to be harvested, very, very first things, were often reserved for the creator or, the needy, or an offering of sorts, right? A show of goodwill, a show of, I don't need this as much as I need God. So I'd rather offer this to God and earn his good favor. And, granted, this is very, very caveman mindset. We're talking about thousands of years ago. But the first instance of actual slaughter would be when Noah, the ark lands, and Noah makes a burnt offering. So, we don't know how he was slaughtered, how the animal was slaughtered, but he makes burnt offerings of multiple animals. Now, it's also worth noting that this is probably the first instance of actual slaughter, arguably ordained by God. And God did not demand that. That's another thing to notice. Man may have trapped himself into an inescapable cycle when he committed that first act of slaughter. The Noahide laws, which God addresses diet. He says, you will not eat any flesh with the blood therein. No flesh. Now, a lot of people interpret that as, well, we can eat flesh as long as the blood's not in there, as long as you drain the blood. But if we're getting down to the nitty-gritty, we have to acknowledge that God did not demand the sacrifice. God did not ask for the sacrifice. Man simply offered it to him. And last night we were talking about the favorable, smells. I'm a vegetarian, but if you come walking down the, meat smells terrible, corpses smell terrible. But if you're walking down the street and you don't know what the source is, you smell that ham smell with all the spices and seasonings. It's a fragrant, it's a warm, and if you're God, might even be more pleasing, because blood sacrifice achieves nothing. The blood is distasteful to God. In Cain and Abel, it actually gives us a definition of adrenochrome and the dangers of adrenochrome, the dangers of ingesting blood, and how blood is perceived, the shedding of blood is perceived by God. When Cain slays Abel, potentially the first cannibal, right? Cain and Abel, when Cain slays Abel, Abel's blood drips into the ground. And God says that he could hear the screams in the blood. So maybe God does expect or is pleased by animal sacrifice, but he is most certainly offended, displeasured by bloodshed. So slaughter, the burnt offerings, blood falling into the ground will not affect God's decision making. God's great, and he's not material. So trying to act on the immaterial with material by shedding blood down here on earth and hoping that it'll affect some change in the heavens is foolish. It is caveman logic. However, burnt offerings is what the Lord demands. And you'll see, as the industries expand and as civilization takes hold again on the earth, God comes closer and closer to demanding fragrant plant incense. It's the smoke and the scent that God demands. Air rises up to the heavens, so blood achieves nothing. It drips down into the ground, and you're, like I said, you're seeking to effect change in the immaterial by acting on the material. It leads nowhere. Whereas the burnt offering, it takes the material and it transcends it into the immaterial. You're taking a corpse or, spices, herbs, fragrant, seasonings, things like that. When you burn those, their subtle influence rises high, and the sense, which you cannot touch, you cannot look at a scent, you cannot touch a scent, you cannot, right? Kind of like God. So we're getting closer to God through the olfactory senses. The fragrances rising up to heaven is the only way that man can truly effect change in the heavens, the immaterial, because you're casting something immaterial or on the border of being immaterial, smoke, fragrant resins, incense. This is what God really desires and what really pleases God. Now, the instance of burnt offerings could be applying to animal-derived fats. Maybe you had to slaughter the animal to get the fats, but if you just got off a boat and the whole world was reshaped, the whole surface of the world was reshaped, and there was nothing growing out of the ground, very little growing out of the ground, are you going to have all this coconut oil and lavender and pine resin at your disposal? Are you going to have all this sage, cinnamon, and all these pleasing herbs? They're not really going to be abundant, especially after the flood. What was abundant was animals. And I think Noah made do. I think he did the best he did. He was trying to source oil or fat as a vehicle for fragrant incense. This is what needs to be stressed. God doesn't seek it, but favors fragrant incense. And initially, in tumultuous conditions, animal's the best that you can do. It's a placeholder. It's a caveman's substitute for the incense in the temples that later on would become the true method of worship. That God says, I want Lord's holy incense. The Lord's holy incense is, this is the true burnt offering that God demands day in and day out. Olive oil. Now, back, if you couldn't get olive oil, you might have had to take butter, you might have had to take fat or lard from the animal as a vehicle for your fragrant herbs and spices. So I forgot what I was going to say.
Yeah.
But
well, I appreciate. I mean, you really made your point clear about, if I heard you correctly, you're saying any type of animal sacrifice could be better understood through the lens of it being for its aroma. And
yep. Yes.
Yeah.
Bingo.
But right before that, like I was saying, I couldn't help but bring up how, from my understanding, most Christians, and when I've gone to church, it's like a recurring theme about the blood of Jesus is washing over us. And, everybody kind of having that belief that, Jesus was sinless. He did no sins, but he came here to,
right.
His Father required him to be blood sacrificed, right? I mean,
right.
But I don't, but yeah. So
now, when Noah made that first burnt offering, it's right after that God says he was pleased, and then says, well, I liked what you did, but now every animal in the world is going to be terrified of you because you now have the stain, the persona of a predator, a hunter. You want to live that life. Well, now you want to talk that talk. Well, now you're going to walk the walk. And I'm going to make you walk the walk. So remember, God wanted the fragrant smoke. He did not compel Noah to slay the animal. It's implied that Noah slayed the animal and then made the burnt offering. Then God says, well, hang on. If you're going to go slaughtering animals, well, now I'm going to demand your blood. And it's your blood that you're actually seeking to pay off by shedding animals' blood. But if anybody's using that passage as a justification for animal or blood sacrifice, you need to keep reading and see that he says, at the hand of every beast and your brother. So anyone looking to the Noahide laws as a justification for eating meat or sacrificing animals will have to acknowledge that in the same breath that those are quote unquote granted, God is also granting the consumption of grasshoppers, maggots, deep sea creatures. And if the sacrifice is being justified in that passage, then it's also the justification of human sacrifice, which is where I separate from most interpretations of the Bible is Noah made a mistake, or Noah opened up a can of worms that nobody had the power, authority, or good grace to close until Jesus came around with that authority, with that purity of heart and mind. And it was Jesus who was the only possible candidate who could have closed that can of worms. Because it's an endless cycle. The moment you shed someone's blood, there's a debt. And that debt needs to be filled. And God is kind of saying, well, you're going to be sacrificing till you're blue in the face because of the lifestyle that you've chosen. And Jesus is the only way that ended. And if you want to look at this astrotheologically, you can kind of take the interpretation and the personality elements out of it and just kind of look at the big picture. Moses, to mosey around, slowly move, like a cow. Moses was the age of Taurus, hence the golden calf, hence the Baal worship and Moloch. Moloch is not an owl, by the way. Moloch is a cow. It's where we get the word milk. In different languages, Moloch means milk. Molk, Molkovo, right? Like a Clockwork Orange, right? Molkovo. It's Moloch, and it's where we get the word mal, meaning bad, but whatever. So it's worshiping Saturn.
Malice,
Sorry.
right? Like
Sorry?
malice.
Yeah, exactly. Malice is Moloch, same word. And in the Bible, it actually says Malek. Malek. So it's Saturn worship. Satanism, blood sacrifice, is Saturn worship. In the age of Taurus. Taurus. Well, then you have Aries, which is Abraham and the ram and the sacrificing of the ram. Then the necessary conclusion, because we're working backwards through the zodiac and it's getting more caveman and more caveman. And then we get over to Pisces, which is the end of the zodiac. But in the ages, it's the first. It's the new age. It's the new cycle. So Aries to Pisces is the biggest shift you get astrotheologically. And because of that, Jesus put an end to blood sacrifice on the world stage. He was the last, to your point, was he blood sacrificed? You could look at it that way, but God did not demand it. He chose to live that way because he wanted to absolve all the debts. He said, man has fallen so low. Man is in such a, what's the word when you're stuck in a never-ending pattern of bad behavior?
A rut.
Because,
Like
sorry?
in a rut or disrepair.
Yeah, disarray or just, it's like when you're not a pickle, but it's like, you tell one lie and now you need 100 lies to sustain the one lie, right? You take one act of blood sacrifice and now it's endless blood sacrifice because that debt can never be washed away. That blood debt can never be resolved. It can only be delayed, right? Debt gets passed on. If you die with debt, they'll try and pass it on to your kids, stuff like that. This debt could not be done away with. And man's guilty conscience furthered this. He felt he needed to sacrifice more and more, especially, this wasn't everybody's problem, Alex. This was really just the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the people who still rule the world today.
Distic, right?
Yep, sadistic is it goes back to sadism too. Sad. They'll tell you it's this guy with the last name Sad, but it's Saturn, Shabbat, Sabbath, sad, to be sad. This is all the same word. Urn, Saturn, to be dead in an urn, burnt, charred in an urn, urn. That's Saturn. So 100%. And Jesus was the sacrifice of all sacrifices. He marked the end of the age of blood, which is Aries. Aries rules the blood. It rules iron in the blood. It rules the color red. It rules violence and rampage. And Abraham represents Aries too. Abra. Abraham. Abra is the same word as April. Means to open the door. Abrir. To open the door, to begin. And that's why Aries, the first sign of the zodiac, Abraham symbolized that. And the ram sacrifice, the lamb and the ram, that's Jesus. Or sorry, that's the beginning of the Jesus story, is the sacrifice of the ram and the lamb. Jesus comes full circle and voids that transaction. He says, no. I am the Lamb of God. I am the last sacrifice. I'm the mother of all sacrifices. And from here on, there will be no confusion about whether God does demand sacrifice, for he does not. And Jesus proved that. He proved that by turning thousands of people away from their habits of blood sacrifice. It was the greatest shift in human consciousness that mankind can remember, was the overturning of this blood sacrifice system, which may still be ruling the world today, but the vast majority of people are not fooled by it and do not feel as though they need to participate. In Jesus' time, what it looked like was the Jews ran the meat markets in the Old Testament. The Pharisees and the Sadducees, they ran the meat markets. It was part of their religion, black magic, Babylonian blood magic, to have incessant shedding of blood, day in and day out. It's what their religion calls for. Jesus was setting the record straight, disproving that, and he led by example. And, I guess if I may, I'll talk about his resurrection, because I know you asked about that too. Jesus resurrecting, it means a lot of things. Astrotheologically, he's the Son of God, and he's the sun in the sky. It's the same word for a reason. The Son of God is the sun in the sky, and it always rises again. Now, December 25th is not in the Bible, but you also asked about his birthday, which is a great rabbit hole too. Jesus was born of a virgin. Now, that can mean that he was truly born of a virgin. It can happen. It has happened. There is certain instances, sometimes survival scenarios, where people can create a child from a virgin birth. There are some theories that women can hold on to genetic material from their father, that deep within them there is the same knowledge contained within sperm, and that's the genetic contribution of their father. There are some people who look at it as virgin birth just means that the child you had is not the result of a person that you had sex with. So, Alex, I was born of a virgin birth. You could make the case. I was born with in vitro fertilization. Was not conceived by two humans. It was my father and my dad, Sorry, my father and my
Your father, but yeah.
yeah, father up there, not my two dads, but it was my dad and my mom. It was my dad and my mom, but I was created in a petri dish, like my brother too. So
Huh.
we're some of the earliest IVF babies, and that
Huh.
South Florida is one of the first places that became a thing. So hey, maybe just creating a child outside of the womb and then putting it back in the womb might count as a virgin birth. But astrotheologically, it probably makes a little bit more sense. Jesus represents the age of Pisces. The sun is born on 2 days. The sun, depending on how you look at astrotheology. There's the winter solstice, when the sun completely falls and becomes dormant for 3 days, and then rises for the very first time and begins his climb back through the kingdom of heaven. Spring and summer are the kingdom of heaven. The sun is reigning supreme. Fall is ruled by Lucifer. Winter is ruled by Satan. So Lucifer is the tempter. It's Venus tempting you into the sunset. Sunset, set is Saturn. Aries is the sunrise. Adam is the sunrise. Eve is the sunset. It's the mistake. Lucifer, how is Lucifer and the serpent the same thing? We were talking about that last night.
Like
But
evening. Evening.
exactly. Evening, evil, sunset, all the same. Fall, the sun's setting because the sun is falling. And Lucifer's a fallen angel because he rules the fall time. And the scales too is the it doesn't matter.
Any
Jesus,
Virgo though? Anything with Virgo, like Virgin?
right? That's what I'm getting at. Is Jesus was a Pisces, and you can look at that. He was not a Pisces. He represented the age of Pisces. However, the sun is born on December 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th, those 3 days, depending how you look at it. But the other day that the sun finds significant is March 20th. March 20th is when the sun conquers. It's when the sun begins his kingdom, right? End of winter, beginning of spring. Well, now the sun is taking larger and larger portions of the day in the sky, more sunlight throughout more of the day. So in that instance, the cusp between Pisces and Aries, kind of like your friend, is also one of Jesus's significant dates, and that is Easter. That's the original Easter. So Easter is just the closest full moon to the spring equinox, original. And these are the two Jesus days, right? And astrotheologically, it's pretty evident. But December 21st or 25th is not in the Bible, so a lot of people kind of throw that to the side and think it's so, you've just been watching too much Zeitgeist, or you've just been listening to too much this and that. But it is true. People who look at Jesus as the sun god kind of tend to devalue Christianity and say, well, that's just the same story as every other story. Horus did the same thing. Buddha did the same thing. Mithra did the same thing. There's some truth to that because everyone's looking at the same sun. But this sun god, this solar deity, forgot he was God, remembered he was God, rose to the level of God through wisdom and purity of heart, and then stressed good morals, battled blood sacrifice, and battled money changing and corruption, financial, exploitation. Now, not every sun god's done that. Not every sun god is given those attributes. So everyone is likened to the sun a little bit. And you could even say that you're graded. All humans are graded against the sun. If you walk into a room and you are full of life, you are likened to the sun. If you walk into a room and you are a downer, you are likened against the sun, saying, oh, he's rainy, he's cloudy, he's stormy. damp, these are negative personality traits. Whereas everybody's likened to the sun as well. And if you have charisma, if you have energy, if you're benevolent, you're likened to the sun. So Jesus, being the most benevolent person has ever been, and being a great teacher among men, and a great charismatic, leader, of course he's going to be likened to the sun. So much so that you could say he mastered the art of being solar, being being the sun, learning from the sun, taking direction from the sun, to be disciplined. The sun never falters. The sun shows up on time always, no matter what. Despite what these losers on Ancient Aliens would have you believe, despite what Jason from Archaics would have you believe, the sun will never falter. It will always rise again. And this is another great gift that Christianity bestows. The world's not going anywhere. The sun's not going anywhere. The moon's not going anywhere. They are here to stay. All is in divine order and harmony. And you can rest assured that sun will rise again. So you've completely, if you're truly reading the Bible, you are protected against nihilism. You are protected against this catastrophism. Like, oh, we're just sitting around for the next reset. We're just waiting for the next bad thing to happen. That's not true. Or a lot of people today think the sun's not going to rise again, or the poles are going to shift and all this horse shit. A bunch of nonsense. Jesus sets the record straight. The sun will rise again, whether that's him or not. And then also, as far as resurrecting in the flesh, there's some interesting stuff. I don't want to get too heretical here, but I also don't care, about ruffling feathers. There's theories that there was cults in the area during that time that used to lock people in tombs for 3 days. And then, in order to bring about some altered state of consciousness, it's kind of like Aaron Rodgers got stuck in one of those dark room retreats. You hear about these where they stick you in a pitch black room?
I didn't hear about Aaron Rodgers, but I hear about that. Like it could be an
Right.
isolation chamber, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like that, your
So
sense
that's
of motivation.
right. There's lots of interpretations. The literal, the most obvious is that he did die and was resurrected. Now, also, you'll notice this is the first. I saw your comment last night. It was a good comment, very witty of you. Quick on the trigger. When Jesus is resurrected, is the only instance where he actually eats. They put a little piece of fish on his tongue to make sure that he's literally in the flesh, right? They touched him and they're like, "Hang on, I'm not convinced. Put this in your mouth. Eat this. Come on, show us if you can really chew something." And that was one of the biggest proofs that he was in the flesh. Now, to me, am I automatically convinced of a physical resurrection? I'm not. Do I think it can happen? Yes. Do I think that if there was a man like Jesus Christ who attained all the things we credit him with, I think he very well could have had that ability. I do believe in magic to that extent, that corpses can be reanimated. Another thing is that Apollonius of Tyana, who is my number one choice for a true literal Jesus, Apollonius of Tyana, his name means son of the sun. Apollonius, Apollo of the sun. He is said to have ascended into heaven, and I think this is more of like a ghostly thing. If we're talking a literal resurrection where these people saw it, if he died, his soul came back and proved to the people that your soul's not going anywhere. You can die, and everything that you call you will still remain. The physical body can cease to exist, and you still remain. Your life is eternal. Even your identity is eternal. You might not have the same face and body and throughout every life, but it is still the same identity. And Jesus was the ego of all egos. He taught man that it's okay to have individuality, and that he's also the biggest solution to the ego problem. You've got a lot of these ascetic people out in the East saying you have to shave your hair, you have to strip away your identity. All these things are illusions. Jesus proved to us there's only one illusion: death. That's it. Everything here is real as real can be, but the game is that you're not trapped here. So the Gnostics get fooled, the ascetics get fooled. It's a valid path for a lot of people, the ascetic path, but Jesus really showed us the other way. He showed us the Western tradition. He showed us the conquering desires, not just isolating yourself from them, right? A lot of these Buddhists, a lot of the radical Jewish sects back then were actually very Hindu based. Were very, India based. Lots of Vedic wisdom in there. And some of that stuff gets a little bit too ascetic. And I tend to view ascetic practices as for like karmic criminals. Like you're trying to burn off a lot of karma very quick, or you're trying to stop your karmic descent. You're doing poorly, or you're doing these things, and you want to stop and take the reins into your own hands and then steer yourself back into a good path. Ascetic practices are good for that. But the problem with ascetic practices is that ultimately, a lot of the times, they're just isolating themselves from temptation. They're just isolating themselves from the attachments. Meaning, let's say I'm joining a Buddhist, monastery, and I've got a Lamborghini, and I've got my haircut. I've got my nice like spiked up hair, and I wear my Gucci clothes and all this, whatever they think the problem is with Western society. Let's just grant them that and say, okay, I'm going to go join a Buddhist monastery, and they're going to fix me. They're going to help me, right? They're going to show me the way. Well, if I'm attached to my car, if I'm attached to my haircut, if I'm attached to all these things, and I move to China and they shave my head, they take away my car, they take away all my things, and they make me sit there for a year or 2 years, or train the tigers, feed the tigers, wash the temples, whatever, wash the floors, all these things. Have you really conquered those desires? You might be able to. You might find a mind space. Once you're away from all the distraction, you might find a better tether to the truth and find a deeper way of living. But ultimately, in the big picture, across the board, you're usually just depriving people of their temptations, depriving them of their attachments, rather than conquering them. Who is the strong man, Alex? Who is the strong, wise, temperate man? The one who chooses not to murder out of the kindness of his heart, or the man who is imprisoned for trying to murder someone and then for the rest of their life is prevented from murdering anybody? Is it better to be isolated from your temptations and your sins, or is it better to conquer them directly? To take the full brunt of it yourself and say, the buck stops with me. I can still, if you're addicted to pornography, right? Have you really conquered your addiction by throwing away all your laptops? Throwing away all your phones and stuff like that? Avoiding certain places where they sell certain things? No, you need to conquer that. Conquer it by having it available to you everywhere. Being a healthy eater doesn't mean that I went to a country where there's no healthy food. Being a healthy eater means that I live in a country where there's a shit ton of bad food, and I have the strength, the commitment to eat better nonetheless. That's true strength to me. That's true forgiveness, is facing your enemies head on. You can forgive someone. If someone wrongs you and then you move to another country, did you forgive them? Right? No, it's just
Those are
a
great points. It makes me think, I'm sure you're aware when there's children that are never exposed to junk food and then they're given junk food, they think it's disgusting compared to children that kind of get addicted to it. Then you try to give them healthy food and they think the healthy food's disgusting.
right.
So it's interesting. And it makes me think what whoever said it, Socrates, about like true wealth is in just learning to be content and grateful for what you have, because it's almost like it will never end if people are always needing that type of
Right.
so yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I wanted to also one thing about the Virgo and born of a virgin, Pisces, who we said was representative of Jesus, or Jesus was representative of the age of Pisces. That Virgo is directly opposite Pisces on
Okay.
the zodiac. So there's a couple ways to look at it. Some people say that Jesus was born 9 months after Virgo. He was conceived in Virgo.
Okay.
Very rarely have I ever heard people think that he was born in Virgo, even though that would be one of the interpretations. Born in Bethlehem, the house of bread, born of a virgin, Virgo. But it's not being born in Virgo. It's either being conceived in Virgo and then 9 months later, which, well, shit, what's the math on that? Um, let's see. Virgo is the end of August. So August, September, October, November, December.
Mhm.
And, well, we're about, so that's not 9 months, but nonetheless, it's either 9 months after Virgo, which would not be December, but could be a potential birthday for Jesus, or it's looking at Virgo and then looking at the same axis that it shares with Pisces, which is, what's that axis nicknamed? What's the axis? The motto? Service.
So
Service.
yeah.
Pisces and Virgo are the two signs of service, and then Cancer is also in there too, because it's Cancer, can do, service, and then Virgo is the hermit or the cave dweller. So it's under the surface. Service and surface are the same word. And then Pisces rules the surf, the ocean, the,
Mhm.
the, the deep seas, and that's also surface. So you can go under the surface of the ground in Virgo, you can go under the surface of the ocean in Pisces, and Cancer also rules the ocean. So you see surface. But Jesus was a servant of God,
Yeah.
and servant of mankind. So just one level. Yeah.
Earlier, a thought that came to mind about death like being an illusion, and then also your thoughts on like separation from God being an illusion. Because I think there's a way to look at it from the Bible talking about like what the fall from the garden was a fall from man's deep connection like with God, right? But then the
Mhm.
idea that that's somewhat of an illusion, like even though, like you touched on, we maintain this individuality, but the idea that can we be separated like from God, and then that we could get into the opposite of Jesus somewhat, right? When we talk about Moloch or this idea of whatever we want to call it, the Illuminati or New World Order, or people that are, trying to deceive and trying to appease what? Moloch, trying to appease some.
Right.
Is that real? Is that real because they're trying to summon it or make it
That's a
real?
great point. That's a great point, and it's a tough one to tackle. I mean, hey, I can rattle off facts about Florida all day long, but when we're talking about the Bible, I'm just doing my best. This is the best we can do with my interpretation, your interpretation. It is a lifelong relationship. So I'm still getting there, but as far as the devil and who are we servicing through certain acts that maybe separate us from God, well, the Bible is a little bit of a has a little bit of semantics to it. There's a little game of you know some name calling that is confusing sometimes. But if you pay attention to the words being used for God, you can usually come away with a clearer understanding of God's multiple facets. So I've given speeches where I've said, but God does not have fingers. He influences this world, but not with his fingers. He doesn't just reach his fingers down and pick up a chess piece and move it over here. He has his lights and his stars and his luminaries. They sing, they twinkle, they cast their subtle influence down here onto this fertile ground, almost like a 3D printer. And then the stars and the light are the mechanism by which everything's animated down here. So Mother Earth down here is receiving what God gives from above. And every time we say the Father, we point up to the sky because it's fire, air, and ether. Father, Father, fat, like Jupiter. Jupiter rules fat. Jupiter rules, to fathom something. A fathom is distance, right? This is Jupiter. So the Father all goes back to Jupiter. The false father is Saturn. The mother fucker, Joseph. Joseph is not God, but he has sex with the father. He has sex with the mother of Jesus, making him a mother fucker. Joseph is Seth. Seth is Set. Set is Saturn. Make no mistake about it. When you're saying someone's motherfucker, you're saying you're satanic. I hate you. I disagree with who you are as a person. When you give someone the middle finger, that is the Satan mudra. That's the Saturn mudra saying, fuck you. I'm done with you. You're irredeemable. I'm not spending any more time on this. So that's the Saturn mudra. So in the human body, we can kind of better understand God too. You have Mercury, the small one, the tiniest, smallest planet, right next to the sun. You have Venus, and this is knowledge. This is, education, snootiness, right?
Next to the sun, but I guess we don't need to get into that right now. Sometimes people might think of the heliocentrism.
Yeah, sure. Well, Mercury in both models, heliocentric and geocentric, is the servant of the sun. Mercury is the messenger god.
Mhm.
He's the Messiah. So Jesus is in part the Messiah, and there's been multiple Messiahs. Moses fits that bill a little bit too. A lot of Jewish people think that Moses was the Messiah, that other patriarchs after him were the Messiah. So there's differing opinion, but Messiah means messenger. There's Mercury. And there's Venus. Venus is the planet of romance and law. So, sorry, that's Libra. Sorry. Just romance and love and beauty and
That's why
feminine.
Eve, Venus and Eve.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Eve is Venus. Mars is Adam. Eve is Venus. And that is the, men come from Mars, women come from Venus, right? Well, men come from Adam, women come from Eve. And Eve is Venus. Yes, that's the V in there, but it's specifically the sign of Libra, where Venus and Saturn are stuck in the same sign. So it's the love and the law. That's what Aleister Crowley was all about. He was a Libra. Love is the law. He knew how to make a motto using his astrology. So then you have Mercury, Venus, Saturn, Satan, right? Middle finger, fuck you. The longest one, the tallest one, the farthest from God, Saturn, the farthest planet away. That's your middle finger. Jupiter, Jesus, Thor, it's the pointer finger. Jesus is always pointing the way, always. He's either doing this, which is Jupiter nullifying Saturn. The peace, this is peace. And this is peace too. It's also victory. It's saying Jupiter conquers Saturn, or at least they cancel each other out. So this mudra is peace. This one is showing, also Jesus. This is Jesus's main mudra right here. This is pointing the way, and that's peace. So we can see the qualities in Jesus. And then also Mars is the thumb. This is action. This is what separates man from the rest of the animals. Man for Mars. This is the thumb. And Adam was the first guy with a thumb. First human with a thumb. So Then let's also just look at the terminology. Like I said, the words in the Bible. God is God. God is all seven together. God, capital G, is the seventh letter in the alphabet. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Seven. God is 777. Good luck, jackpot, nothing but goodwill. God is good and his design is good, his creation is good. God said it was good. Well, God, as a greater deity, can be segmented or faceted to be better understood in his various, not capabilities, but duties, in his various areas of dominion. He takes a different form, right? One God, and I know this is kind of dumbing it down a lot, but one God, if he had to do everything around the world, if he was responsible for fixing everything around the world, if he's responsible for presiding over the good and the bad, I mean, how messy and hard to understand is that, right? Hang on, so God's the good guy, but he also just, gave my daughter leukemia? Well, what the heck, man, right? You've got to understand, God is faceted. And in the Bible, it actually says Elohim. The definition of God is Elohim, which means multiple, like either multiple angels or multiple planets. El is the supreme deity, but Elohim is plural. And when God turns around and starts talking to the angels in the Garden of Eden, or it's implied that he's talking to angels, he says, well, shit. Now he knows that he's like one of us. Man and woman have become like gods. They've become like us. Not like me, not like the one me, like us. So I tend to believe in a lot of Kabbalists, Kabbalah, a lot of ancient Hebrew, um, esoteric researchers are pretty firm on the idea that Elohim applies to the seven facets of God, seven faces, seven characters that represent him in different arenas of life. The God who shows up to your wedding is not the same God who shows up to the execution of a criminal. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
It is the same God in the big picture. This bottle of orange juice is God. So if you really want to get like very relativistic or uh, boiling everything down to God, this orange juice bottle is God. This money, this cash in front of me is God. Everything here is God. So wasting words on what is or what isn't God doesn't achieve much. But astrotheologically speaking, in order to get a better understanding of the Bible, God is good. And I tend to associate that with the greater God. God is capital G. Then there's the Lord. The Lord is undoubtedly identified with Saturn. It is the Lord who's demanding sacrifice a lot of the time. It's the Lord who says, go kill them, go pillage that city. It's the Lord who, the Lord is Saturn, the God of the Old Testament. The Lord of the Old Testament is Saturn. And at different periods, Saturn has a lot of sway on the earth and has more influence. Well, Saturn is the lowered one. It is lowered. Lord is lowered from heaven to earth. This is the capital L of the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians, for principal deity, was El, and El is Elohim, and it's the capital L in Lord. Then Lucifer is not the same as Satan. Lucifer is Venus. Lucifer is the beautifier, the tempter, the seducer, seductive, tempting, alluring.
Hmm.
This is very much Lucifer. Sorry, my cat's meowing here. But when it says Yahweh, Yahweh is Jupiter. Yahweh, and some people might disagree on this, Yahweh is Yehovah. Yehovah is Jove, Hove, Jove, different languages, Jove, Jupiter. To be jovial is to be benevolent. Yahweh is also the four corners of the zodiac, YHWH. It's Taurus, Some people say it's Aries, but it depends. This is all very like theoretical astrotheology. It doesn't matter. You can read a Bible and not need to know any of this stuff. But Yahweh is either um, Aries, Cancer, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, which is YHWH. The H's are C's that are repeating. H, like an H in Hebrew is ch, right? You kind of cough the H's out, right? So the C in Hebrew, YHWH, is really A. The Ah is Ah, Aries, Aries, Capricorn. Sorry, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn. So the two H's, which repeat, are the two C's in the zodiac,
Hmm.
Cancer and Capricorn. So it's the four corners of the zodiac. Um, but Jehovah is definitely identifiable with Jove. And then, so God is good. The Lord is the lowered one, ultimately Saturn. You could even say Satan, if that's not too heretical. But the Lord of the Old Testament is Saturn. That's why he wants sacrifice. That's why he wants, all these things. The God of the New Testament is Jupiter. He's benevolent. It's all Greek philosophy. It's all Neoplatonism. It's all benevolence. So,
Well, man, I could have a conversation with you for quite a long time. I really appreciate you sharing all this knowledge and insight. I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, I want to be respectful of time, so kind of um as
we
like
can keep going. I got time, but whatever.
yeah, well, I mean, I do have a lot of different thoughts. I mean, specifically about Jesus, I've read Misquoting Jesus by Bart Ehrman. Um, have you looked into any of his books, Bart Ehrman?
No, I've never heard of him.
He's an interesting person because he has his PhD in the New Testament, and he no longer considers himself a Christian, and it's because of suffering, basically. Long story short. But we don't need to get into it since you haven't heard of Bart Ehrman. But I would
So what
suggest.
is, I'd love to get into that. What do you mean by suffering? Like,
Well, him
there's,
him personally, like I think he now considers himself, to be an atheist, but it's like he was a fundamentalist growing up. One thing led to another. He got his PhD in the New Testament, and at least what I've learned from him is like the more he became a scholar of the Bible, and to be a scholar of the Bible, you have to understand the Greek language and you have to understand Hebrew language because you have to like look into stuff and then to sometimes think like what type of people were Jesus's apostles, were they the type of learned men that were academic, when it comes to their writings, and stuff like that. So they're sometimes going to the source in Greek and Hebrew, and then there being contradictions, and then someone who thinks the Bible's infallible, they have a tough time maintaining that belief as they become a scholar of it, But then obviously there's the apologists, that just go about defending not just the Bible but Christianity. Um, but yeah, I didn't want to get into that if you hadn't necessarily heard of him. And I don't know if you've had a chance to watch that Jordan Peterson interview I shared with you. That was just like a week ago, but that was
that
really
with Alex O'Connor.
yeah, Alex
I
O'Connor.
did, yeah, I did watch most of that. I like Alex O'Connor. He's very smart, very sharp guy. He's pretty lost, it seems,
Yeah,
too. He doesn't have much firm footing, which is a very bad combination for having a very, bright mind. And he I feel for the guy, Alex O'Connor. I feel very bad for him. He renounced his veganism, which I don't know how you are going to, debate philosophy as a career while not holding true to your, most morally, relevant belief, like vegetarianism, veganism. He went out of it for health reasons, I believe, and he's still a pretty thin guy. But it's a shame that he felt the need to do that. I wish I could help him in the ways that I help my friends and stuff like that.
yeah.
But a very smart guy, Jordan Peterson, he's far gone. He's too far gone. his carnivore brain is on its last leg, and he's a smart guy too. My brother really likes him, but he needs to stay in it.
Your
He needs to
first
stay in his lane, as some people say to me.
your first video ever on Old World Florida. Was that intentional, a Jordan Peterson, or did that just happen to be? Because it's kind of interesting.
I was just making fun of like the neoconservative, mainstream talking points like, "Oh boy, you need to clean your room. That'll fix your life. Oh, that'll be bloody difficult. Your life's gonna fall apart." But Jordan Peterson, that was just a joke. It was funny.
Yeah.
Those ASMR videos were
Well,
funny.
what was your biggest takeaway from that, Alex O'Connor interviewing Peterson? Because I thought it was interesting because I feel like we understand something to the degree we can explain it in simple terms, you know? And I feel like Jordan sometimes has a way of like not getting to the point and like being very concise, you know? But finally, Alex kind of asked him point blank, like, do you believe Jesus was born a virgin and, um, the actual resurrection? So I thought that was pretty insightful that Jordan was finally kind of, clarifying some of his beliefs, but then the fact that he still kind of wasn't as concise, as one could be. And I think something you and I resonate with a lot too is we appreciate the mystery of God, right? And the mystery of things instead of thinking like, it's already been figured out.
Hmm. Totally.
But yeah, did you have a big takeaway from that?
Um, Not really. Alex O'Connor does tend to squeeze some of the hardest answers out of people. I think that Jordan Peterson's very materialistic. It's not in like a, hey, here's my purse and here's my gold-plated iPhone, and not that way. But I just mean he's a materialist. Like his conception of the world is restricted to the material. He kind of has like Aristotle syndrome, where his path to Christianity is not really it was very critical and psychological. Like he would generally, if I can speak for him, he would probably tell you that most of the Bible is psychological truth. Like being crucified is what it feels like to be a man and live a life, and we're all need to bear the cross. We all need to do this. And that's true. There's truth to that. But he kind of delivers it as if it's the highest interpretation there is. And he's, privy to it. We should all be so thankful for how deep he when he gets asked a question, he does this. He gets asked a question and he goes,
Yeah. Firing on all cylinders. Right.
exactly. And I'm just like, man, you're digging so deep. You're scraping so deep for such crumbs. It's like, yeah, that's just strikes me as if all you can access is the psychological, you're just going to be ripping your brain apart looking for answers. It's eventually you have to just give it to the stars or give it to heaven and say, that's the mystery of God. That's the mystery of the Bible. It's not just, me, human, 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 right? My life is as bad as Jesus. So let me boil everything Jesus's life was like into my life. It's like, I need to bear the cross. And there's truth to that, but I think Jordan Peterson's very restricted to it. And Alex O'Connor, I feel like he's a he seems like lost, and he just kind of seems like an antagonizer now, even though he's very polite, and like cordial. It seems like he's just ridiculing with a thinly veiled, like professionalism. But it's really just he's really just one of these people who tries to point out the fallacy in Christianity, point out the hypocrisy and stuff like this, and he doesn't really even do a good job. He's just exposing the hypocrisy of certain people who claim to be Christians.
Yeah.
He's not really getting to the source in my mind, but I watch his channel. I like his stuff. And
I never heard of him. I first learned through the Jordan Peterson, and then started watching Sam Harris. And then I did find a video of his from 7 years ago where he's debunking flat Earth, you know? And once again, my philosophy in life is how people, he can be wise in his interview of Jordan Peterson, but that doesn't mean he's wise in his discernment in other areas, kind of, you know? And
yes, he's not wise, that's for sure. He's intellectual.
yeah.
He's bereft of wisdom, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, what would you say? What's one of your favorite things to talk about? I mean, obviously, this has been great. We've mainly discussed Jesus and the Bible, and I love the way you blend in astrology, astrotheology, as you were saying, and then even linguistics, man. As soon as I found your YouTube channel, I just really appreciated like the way you linguistically see the world and the way you share that type of insight and knowledge, and it's like a pattern recognition too, because someone who wants to be an historian, what better way to try to, make sense of the world than through language?
Yeah, 100%. I've heard that smoking pot makes you a makes you
with or-
connect.
with orange juice too, right?
Well, yeah, it makes sure you get the best out of it. Um, that it helps you connect things that don't deserve connecting. And to an academic, it might seem like they don't really fit in. But using astrology, I mean, I feel like I'm drinking from a fire hydrant, and all of the other linguists and astrotheologists are just wandering in the desert. Because if you combine mainstream linguistics, and I only speak English, by the way, I'm not saying I'm like
Yep. A little Spanish here and there, right?
I speak. I'm pretty conversational in Spanish. Can write it and read it, fluently. But in German a little bit too, which gives some insight into the. So conversational German, and then Finnish is something I'm trying to learn a little bit too, and Gaelic eventually. So
Isn't
you
that where
know,
the alphabet came from? The English alphabet, right? Or
yeah. Well, Finnish is Phoenician. That's not acknowledged in mainstream academia, but that's really the gold mine of all these linguistic ties that linguists think are like made up, or syncretic, like wishful thinking. If you know your astrology, you can link these 100%. For example, linguists, etymologists, people who are into the English language, point to English as, I think the word is, I don't know, it's like a glunative or a gluttinative, something like that. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. Cut it out if I did that terribly, but whatever. The the There's a word for a language where one sound has a set meaning in almost every word that it's in, especially if a word starts out with a sound. So, for example, one of the most commonly recognized ones, and one of the ones most relied on in poetry and stuff like that, is the gla prefix, or the gla root. So gla has to do with light and vision.
hmm,
Light, vision. Well, it's glow, glitter, gleam, glare. You see this? There's 100 more that just look it up. The GL, to glean. Um, all these words go back to light, the glowing of light, luminescence. Now, another one, and that's one of the few that they've recognized, um, using no astrotheology, using no astrology. It's just obvious. You look at enough words, you see that it kind of jumps out to you. Well, another one that they haven't really picked up on, but yeah, as an astrologer is just obvious, is ska, the ska prefix, or the ska root. Ska goes back to Scorpio, and ska is exactly how it sounds. There's no flattering words except for skill, which you could be a skilled murderer. You can be a skilled, our word. You can be a skilled criminal. So skill isn't necessarily flattering. It could be a bad thing.
Mhm.
But Scorpio rules Halloween. So Halloween is the holiday of Scorpio. It's the passage into Scorpio, death, underworld, sex, fornication, gore. These all go back to Scorpio. And the or word goes back to Scorpio too. Or and obs roots go back to Scorpio too. Obsolete, obsidian, obscene. Um, there's more, but whatever. Absurd. You can tweak that a little bit.
You said
Then obsolete, death. Obsidian, the darkest, most jagged, sharp mineral there is known to man. Dragon glass, dark. It's the assassin's weapon. And then obsolete, obsidian, and obscene. Scorpio's obscene. What's more obscene than sex and death, right? In public. So that's Scorpio. It's Halloween. And just back to that ska root in Scorpio, you have scare, scour, scourge, scrape, uh, skank, skeet, right? Sex and death and violence and sneaking, like, in the darkness. All these words have to do with very much Scorpio. And then the or root too, or, orgasm, morgue, mortuary, um,
mortgage. There's a whole.
mortgage, exactly. So or largely goes back to Scorpio too. Um, organism, to be birthed. Scorpio rules birth somewhat too. Natal nativity. Nat, the nat root goes back to Scorpio too. Natalie, naughty, nativity, natural, right? So a lot of words have concrete meanings behind them. Sounds, not just words. A lot of sounds in the English language have concrete meanings, and only an astrologer or astrotheologer can show this to you. So
Hmm.
that's at least, it's seeing the patterns in language. Man's original function was to name things. That's one of the few ways that we're exalted above the other animals is speech. So if you're not studying speech, you're not really studying what it means to be human.
Yeah. I can't help it. Do you have any thoughts on the Tower of Babel? Because I'm sure we'll get into that with your Bible study. And wasn't that because I used to kind of imagine like maybe people were also telepathic. Some
Yep.
I don't want to, maybe we could venture into that, but the idea
Right.
of how, we weren't kind of separated through different language, kind of.
Yeah, that's a popular interpretation, is that man had a telepathic way of communicating and didn't need confusing words to talk. That's not something that I wholeheartedly subscribe to, because in Genesis it does say that God told Adam to name the things. Now, everything he named, God gave it that name. So Adam came up with the names of God's creation. And without Adam, God's creation had no name. You could even argue it had no meaning. And there was no eyes and ears to adequately experience all this creation. So God created mankind to be the vessel, the vehicle through which he could experience his own creation. So when it says Adam named the things in the Garden of Eden, I tend to think that means speech, but hey, that could mean that he could have telepathically came up with the names for everything. So, that could be true, what you're saying. I tend to look at the Tower of Babel, Babylon, all the reggae artists are complaining about Babylon all day. Well, I tend to think that Babylon is the origin of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And Babylon at various times has ranged from Israel and Turkey
Mhm.
to the southern tip of India and even farther east sometimes. Between there, you do have the origin of the Jewish people coming out of the Sephardic Jews coming out of India, believe it or not. That's why the Sadducees or like sadhus in India, they're like wandering, priests or like homeless holy men. Pharisee goes back to Pharaoh. Sadducee goes back to Sadhu. So these are, Indian Jews and Egyptian Jews. But Babylon is the home of blood magic. Babylon is the source of blood magic. And a lot of things that you think of as Hebrew or Jewish today are really just Babylonian blood magic getting adulterated into the Bible. Well, for example, like blood sacrifice, the blah blah blah. So Babylon, to me, is when things started getting written down. And by writing things down is where confusion comes from. Because when you're only talking, there's no confusion. One sound is one sound, and it's reproduced by everyone the same. And the meaning is intuitive. Whereas when you write something, let's say I write something down. Um, this also kind of gets into like Tartaria and Old World and Atlantis, and where's all the records of these great ancient empires? Well, if these people were more advanced than us, advanced to me, advanced is not having an iPhone or a laptop. It's being responsible. If I'm at a park and there's some hobo with an iPhone and he's throwing his beer cans all over the place, and then there's some girl there who just walked to the park and has nothing on her, has no devices, no anything, but she's not littering. Who's more advanced?
Mhm.
Does the guy with the iPhone get to say that he's more advanced because he has the more advanced technology? Or is it the more responsible one who maybe still has access to that same technology, but is not littering, is not doing these bad things along with it? And to me, this shows that you have an emphasis on responsibility, and everything that we manufacture in this age is going to be the problem of another age. And thousands of years ago, they might have had the foresight not to do that. For example, we've got Snicker wrappers and shit all over the place today. They're gonna pop open a tomb thousands of years from now. There's gonna be a Snicker wrapper there. The orange juice bottle and all this garbage and junk. Well, thousands of years ago, people didn't make junk. People didn't create junk. They built what needed to be built. They didn't waste. And even when it came to carving, they wouldn't carve stone. The real most advanced people in the world never carved stone. The Bible tells us that in Exodus, we were warned against making holy buildings out of hewn stone. Arion, shut up. Shh.
Your cat.
Sorry.
Cat.
Yeah, it's dinner time. Yeah, sorry. Um, the where was I? Forgive me. We can
Uh,
wrap we can wrap it up after this. But
so Babylon. Basically, you were talking about like responsibility, and then I've been
yes.
about like stewardship because in kind of summary, or as we start closing up, from my understanding of the Bible and being a follower of Jesus, we are to be like stewards, and like what you're saying, I think that's kind of where you're going, like this idea of respecting, and being a steward. And without going on a tangent, I articulate it as the intelligent management of abundance and resources, because,
Mhm.
and without going on a tangent, I think our society or our civilization is under a spell of like somewhat artificial scarcity, which then facilitates the lower parts of us. You know what I mean? When people are surviving and competing and struggling and not trying to come together to be good stewards, and then if we take Jesus's, main two commandments, love our neighbors as ourselves and love God with all our heart, soul, and mind. I mean, try to simplify it. But anyway, I think
Well, the the Babylon, you bring up some great points. The whole Tower of Babylon leading up to that, maybe we'll have to do another talk on.
It's good.
But the changing of the tongues and the confusion of the tongues, to me, I'm not saying a cause or an effect, doesn't matter. We'll discuss that another time. But the confusion of the tongues, to me, the most confusing thing there is writing language down in one age, knowing damn well thousands of years from now, almost no one's going to be able to read it. So how confusing, how, you know, it's like littering your ideas for the future. I mean, these people were the original people from the Golden Age were responsible, and they didn't carve anything into stone that mankind couldn't understand forever. So if one language is getting carved into one building, which by the way, that's why there's no carving on the Great Pyramid. There's no Egyptian on the Great Pyramid. Very little. There's some marking stones they've placed nearby or in the complex to make it look Egyptian, but there's no Egyptian, little to no, if none, Egyptian on the Great Pyramid, because it's not built for Egyptians. It's built for everyone. It's built for every person in the future that could ever come across it. And some of the greatest pieces of architecture are like that too. You'll find very little writing, and as man fell more and more and more, his thoughts became more confused, and he had less and less of a mindfulness for the future, and he started scattering his thoughts all across the earth. Oh, this temple, write the whole story on it. And thousands of years later, there's nobody alive that can translate some of this stuff, and it's confusing. So that's what I see when I see the confusion of tongues. Is you can always have translators. You can always have two people with different languages sit down and converse.
Yeah.
But when you start hewing things, carving certain symbols and certain languages into stone, or just packaging and stuff that's going to be here forever, that is the confusion. That's the greatest confusion that you can cast on the future people. And then yeah, that's really it.
No, and I hear you, man, because I'm sure like when I first realized or remembered like the mathematics of the Great Pyramid, I mean that speaks for itself, and it's mind-blowing.
Right.
Something I heard recently, I don't think it's exactly the Great Pyramid, but somehow there's some pyramid that it's like precise, because I know daylight changes and so on, but like when the sun is setting there and there's no longer any light being cast on it by the sun's illuminating a pyramid in Mexico, kind of showing like just an intelligence, of the designing mind behind it, and
Mhm.
the type of
Right.
respect and stewardship, for everything. So
Right.
yeah. But
Well, in Exodus, just real quick to prove my point, in Exodus it says, Exodus 20 or 25, around there, it says, uh, don't build any hewn stone. If you're building a sacred building to the Lord, to God, you cannot build it with hewn stone. So it tells us they either cast stone, like cement or concrete, or they.
dinner
Yeah,
time.
mister. Yeah, whatever. That's it. We can wrap it up.
Yeah,
But
what type
it
of
says,
thoughts would you like the viewers to have? Obviously, I can put a shout out for you. Head to it's dancingelephant.shop.
yep, yep.
You got
Old
make,
World, Florida.
make Atlantis great again hats coming in, right?
Yep, these are going to be available soon. That you can buy them in person. But make Atlantis great again, visors. All right,
Is that a
gotta
vision,
run.
like a Church of New Atlantis down the line, maybe, or something? Or we'll see.
I don't know. It's just a joke for now. It's
Okay.
funny.
Well, thank you so much, man, for being on the podcast, the second episode. I really appreciate it, and look forward to having you on again. And in the meantime, I guess read some Bible, right? For the viewers, read some Bible and try to uh follow Jesus, right?
So yeah,
Yes, sir.
thanks for having me, Alex.
Appreciate it. All right, man. Go feed that cat, Dr. Narco Longo.
That's what she said.
All
Bye
right.
bye.
Thanks
Take
everybody
care.
for watching.
Thanks a lot, man.
Appreciate it. All right. Bye.
Bye.